There's a temptation now to believe that you do not need to memorize things because all of the facts are at your fingertips. And at the risk of sounding like an old man or sounding like a preachy teacher, I think that there is genuine value in memorizing things. I'm not just saying this because I'm used to a specific educational perspective or because I'm coming from a different time, and maybe that's a part of it, but the angle that I'm coming from is it is just quicker and more satisfying to be able to work on something from your own mind, to not have to externalize your attention so frequently in order to understand what is going on with a problem. When you have a deep working memory of something, it creates more likelihood of some kind of sense of flow and ease with really digging into whatever topic it is that you're working with, and less of these frustrating sticking points that aren't a matter of having difficulty with the problem, but are a matter of not having the necessary knowledge to tackle the problem. And with all of that context in mind, you're probably thinking, how is this going to tie into games, Chris? It does. It ties into game design and pacing things in a way that allows the player to remember your game mechanics. Sure, more importantly, for where I'm at right now, it ties into the process of learning a new skill and knowing what to focus on and knowing where to focus your attention. I've recently been doing a lot of memorization techniques. Specifically, I've been using spaced repetition, which I highly recommend you look into if you need to memorize anything that's kind of difficult to memorize. I recommend looking into that. And I've also just been thinking about the usefulness of memorizing things, because as much as I just praised it, there's a bunch of things that just aren't that useful to memorize, and there's massive limitations to the role of memory and how useful it really is, because memory without understanding is essentially worthless. And that is the first thing that I'm going to talk about when talking about games and tutorials. We'll get into that right now. Thank you, as always, for listening. This is Game, Develop, Repeat, and I'm your host, Chris. I have a bone to pick with a very specific type of game tutorial, and any chance that I get to attack it from another angle, I will. And I have one of those chances today. Listen, I hate text dump tutorials. I'm not talking about press A to jump. I'm not talking about here's what all the controls do. A is jump, Y is heavy attack, X is light attack, square is block. I'm not talking about that kind of thing. If it drives you insane that I just said square instead of B, I'm sorry. I've addressed it for your sake. I'm not talking about just that. I'm talking about the kind of text tutorial that says, if you would like to attack an enemy because an enemy is approaching you, then as they get within this range, you need to press A. When you press A, it will initiate your attack. You can see when your attack is about to hit your enemy by this line that is going across the screen near your enemy in front of your character. The character swinging the sword makes the line appear. If you press A again, after that animation has completed, you will attack once again. If you press before that animation has completed, then it will queue up a second attack or have no effect, because it kind of depends. Like, if you give me that kind of text box, and yes, I'm exaggerating a little bit. If you give me that, I have an issue with it. And it comes down to a communication issue, a teaching issue that is a trap that I fall into. If you can probably guess this by listening to me talk on the podcast, I over communicate. about specific ideas. I over elaborate. I say so much that you lose the point. Too many words, not enough information. That is the problem with these text-based tutorials, because all of this information that you can get over just text, just the written word, it's so dumb. I'm sorry. I was going to say that in a much more elegant way, but imagine that you're on a hike and you get to the peak of a mountain and you start looking out and you want to go look at the view, and there's just a guy with you who won't shut up about how beautiful it is, and he's like standing in the way of your view. Like he stands in front of you and is like pointing at individual things, blocking the majority of the view. Like, look at that thing, look at this thing, look at that thing, look at this thing. That is what those tutorials are doing. And I'm gonna dig deeper on this, but that's the big picture. It's just horrific. It's so bad for so many reasons. And I can't stand it is the number one reason. It's annoying. It's Navi going, hey, listen, while you're trying to be immersed in the world. It is a pop-up. It is Clippy showing up and distracting you from your whatever you're working on and going, oh, I see you're trying to write a letter. And you're like, brother, I'm writing an English paper right now. But nice try. Please go away. There's I guess that's a different problem. But there is this thing about excessive pointing out of what you can do and what just happened and so on. It feels condescending, sure. That's not what we're focused on right this moment, though. At least not for me. It is distracting in the weirdest way. And here is the most central point of this argument, of this thing that I want to express to you that is easy to lose sight of, I think, at least for me. When you call someone's attention to something, you distract them from everything else. So when you are teaching somebody, there's this thing that happens that teachers know this. If you've taught somebody, you've probably run into this. And really good teachers know how to just avoid this problem. Like they will be able to use this to their advantage. If you tell a student that something is hard, they will find reasons that it is hard. They will look out for it being difficult, and they will find it, and it will be difficult. If you tell somebody that something is easy, that is not necessarily what will happen. What will happen is they will, it interacts with their own psychology in whatever way, because maybe they're going, oh, well, it's easy. I can never get anything right, so I'll fail it even though it's easy, right? Like there's a lot of different angles, and there's angles like that with the hard thing too. But pretty consistently, if you convince somebody that something is going to be hard, it's going to be hard. If you convince somebody that something is going to be easy, it's going to be easy. People are very easily convinced that something is hard, though. It is not hard to convince most students that something is difficult. You're in an authority position and you say it's difficult, it's difficult. Similarly, forgive the tangent, if you are in an authority position, i.e. you're the game developer and you've written the tutorial for the game that you created, and the player is going through that tutorial that lays out the rules of the universe that they are playing in, whatever you say is written in stone. On the first pass, they're going to go, that is exactly how everything works. Now, words are not precise. So whatever you say does not convey your meaning to them accurately. That is why we are making art. Because words are wildly imprecise. Right? Sorry, that's one of the reasons. But this, I apologize. I was about to go on a whole wild tangent. Let me focus back in. This issue of the fact that words are wildly imprecise can be resolved by not relying on words. The greatest tutorials rely on exploration, on inviting the player to try things and see the results. If you call their attention in a general direction, they'll look in that general direction. If you call their attention to a series of hyper-specific things that they have to pay attention to, they will be put under the belief that those hyper-specific things are the most important things, and they will try to remember that those things are what matters, and they will memorize that, or they will lock it into their brain. Maybe not exactly memorize, but they will lock that in, and they will go, oh, okay, this is what I should be paying attention to, and then they will miss everything else that is going on in your game. Unless they go, screw you, I don't like tutorials, whatever, I'm going to play the game, I'll figure it out. I like a tutorial. A tutorial is useful, but God, I hate tutorials. I have such a love-hate thing there. If it's a great tutorial, oh my God. Breath of the Wild has some pretty great tutorials. Some of those, there can be an info box there where I go, okay, bud, but they're always deeply connected to what you are doing in that moment. It is exploration combined with education. And it is a beautiful thing. It is a great example of really good exploration. Now, at this point, I'm beginning to go, what about memory, though? What are we talking about with memory? Because that's the theme of this episode. So if I'm thinking that, you must be thinking that too. Well, we're going to tie it back in. When you tell somebody, this is how you jump, press A to jump. Okay, great. There's no reason for them to memorize that. Now you give them a moment where you go ahead and jump. Do the thing where you jump. Okay, now they have to remember, press A. And then 10 minutes later, you go, do the thing where you jump, and they go, ooh, how do I do that again? And then they press A, right? This is spaced repetition. It is a technique used to memorize things where you intentionally let yourself start to forget because the memorization happens when you have to dig something out of your memory, not just when it's chilling there on the surface and you're just going over and over and over again saying the same thing. So really long-term memorization sticks with a little bit of a gap between repetitions, and repetition helps too, of course. When you're designing a tutorial, you should keep spaced repetition in mind. If something is very important, it should be an early thing that you interact with regularly for a while, and then occasionally interact with again. And then, make sure you don't forget about it. And you can bring back a mechanic later in the game as you think the player is about to forget about it. And then, oh, there it is again. Or just keep it kind of underlying the entire time so that they know that it's an option. They're reminded that it's an option, and they don't lose track of what the possibilities are. Because this is what we need to memorize as gamers. We need to memorize what our possibilities are. It's a sort of a felt memorization, but you could probably list them out. In any particular game, you could probably go, here are my options. The game presents you with those. The game reminds you of those. The game brings them to the forefront of your mind when it's appropriate and lets them fall back when necessary. And that is essential to game design. Knowing what you are and are not instilling, that's not the right word. What you are and are not inspiring your players to remember, to focus on, to attend to is absolutely fundamental. I'm going to throw a slightly stronger opinion at you today, which is that memorization is vastly underrated. Bit of a broad statement, and, vastly underrated by who, so on and so on. But it's the vibe that I am getting. I could be wrong. Your discretion, up to your life that you are living, so on and so on. I think, generally speaking, it's underrated. I think that there's a feeling that we can look at the world and we can go, every bit of information is at my fingertips. It's fine. I don't need to memorize anything. But here is my reason. Here's my justification for my opinion. Memorization gives you a solid foundation upon which you can build a project, upon which you can play. It gives you stable ground to maneuver on. If you do not have the basics of whatever it is that you're working on, memorized, then every time you try to take a step, your foot will disappear from beneath you. The sand will move. You will sink into mud. You will end up somewhere that you did not expect to end up. But if you know the lay of the land, then you will be able to navigate that information. You will be able to pull yourself out of the mud very quickly if you do slide into it. You will find your way around. And the metaphors that I just used work well for a more technical project, right? If you have mathematical issues that are going on, it's nice to know some fundamental formulas and whatever the heck else is particularly relevant to your specific project. But maybe you just need to know a lot about mythology so that you can play with ideas involving mythological figures. And you can start going, well, what would happen if Zeus had this conflict with Hades? I started playing Hades 2 recently, so now I'm just pulling random god names out of my head. But if you have a fundamental understanding, and not just understanding, but memorization of certain facts, then it will be easier for you to play with that stuff. Now, this is the important caveat. Memorization does not equal understanding. Memorization often comes about as a result of understanding things, but mother of God, you can memorize stuff and not know a single thing about how it works. Jeez, it's rough, right? And you can fool yourself into thinking that you know something just because you have it memorized. And then you start having to use your working knowledge of it and you go, whoa, maybe I don't know how this works. Is it worth it to memorize where certain things are in Godot's submenus if there's something that you've had to pull up a couple different times and every time you have to search it and it takes you more than like 10 minutes to find it? Yeah, dedicate some time to memorize it. Use some note cards. Use some images on note cards using Anki, A-N-K-I, which is a nice free tool for spaced repetition, which is a very good memorizing technique. You can do that kind of thing for anything that is just wasting time and breaking your flow. Cool. Wonderful. But there's also the insidious thing that I talked about a moment ago of thinking that because you have something memorized, it means you understand it. And that is a hard thing to deal with because it's a very real sense of understanding. It really, really convinces you. But the best way to test it is to experiment, which is also the best way to build a deeper understanding of something, which is a great foundational thing for memorizing the facts that you need to memorize. I am still struggling with what the facts are that I need to memorize. There are simple, trivial things that pop up day to day where I go, ooh, that would be good to have memorized, right? An address, a phone number, just basic things that everybody runs into all the time. Like those are the easiest examples, but the things that I run into for my work, for sure, right? Different formulas and measurements and things like that. But in programming, I guess it's going to be certain syntaxes, certain functions that are regularly used, certain menus in the engine, where certain things are, what attributes belong to certain nodes, that sort of thing. But I think I have to do more exploration, to find out exactly what it is that I do want to memorize, what it is that pops up over and over again, or is especially useful once or twice, and I go, oh, I better commit that to memory because that's going to pop up again. That kind of stuff is, I think, really the essential stuff. And then there's sort of a studying memorization of this information is interesting enough that I want it to be embedded in my head so that if it ever comes up, I can bring it to the surface and play with it. That's the category I haven't figured out yet. And I keep feeling like there's a third category. There's quick recall stuff. There's foundational, like, interesting knowledge stuff. Those are two different things, I guess. Quick recall is kind of foundational things. And then interesting knowledge, interesting facts, things that you really want to be able to explore and use in your own projects. And then there's just, maybe it's just this is fun. maybe sometimes it's just fun to memorize something, and then I don't know, it kind of turns into a game. But for the love of God, don't trick yourself into thinking that you know how to do something just because you have the steps memorized. Do it. Play with it. And go beyond mere verbal knowledge. Enter the realm of play and see what happens. All right, folks, that is it for this week. I may revisit this topic in the future if I find a way to, well, if I further explore it and gain a better understanding of it, and find a way to present more practical advice about memorization as it relates to game development. As for this past week, I did not do much game development, so it is hard for me to relate this to actual fundamental advice. This was one of those weeks where things just got crazy. I just had, boy, I had a lot of plate on my plate this week, but it happens, right? So that's that. That is this episode. I guess my challenge for you, and then you know what, I'll give you a call to action too. My challenge for you is to figure out if there's something in your life that you just want to memorize, that you keep having to recall it and you keep having to look it up and it's kind of annoying. Is there anything like that? Maybe it's a GPS situation, right? Maybe it's directions to get somewhere. I know that's one for me. I hope that's a common one. I hope it's not for everybody's sake, but I hope it is so that I can feel less bad about it. But there's one, that's a decent one. And then call to action. What do you think is worth memorizing in terms of programming, in terms of game development? What are the things that you think are... Yeah, well, you know what? I'm not going to frame it further than that. What do you think is worth memorizing? Not worth understanding. I do want to make that distinction. I mean, I think they are different things, but I think both understanding it and then memorizing it. What's worth that? That's everything I've got for you this week. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always. And I will see you all in the next one. Have a good week. Get out there, make some stuff, and have fun with it. Bye-bye.